The sun was beginning to set. As the sky outside darkened, a drab loom lit up with the low rays of evening sun, beams reaching their way through the window. A man sat at his desk, putting finishing touches on nondescript paperwork. Leaflets, sketch pages, and balled-up paper scattered from across the wooden surface. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. That's when he heard it. A tapping. A repeated low thump on the window, stationed right behind him. Annoyed, he turned his head to look directly at it. To his surprise, there was no clear source, not at least visible from his side of the room. He sat up and walked over to the window. It was shut already, so he decided to lock it. He couldn't afford any distractions. The project could very well decide whether or not he kept his job. He returned to his desk once more, jotting down notes and typing on his desktop. Then he heard it again. The tapping. At first he ignored it. Probably just neighborhood kids having a little fun. Besides, it was locked. They couldn't open it if they wanted to. But the tapping persisted. The first few seconds of the irritatingly consistent noise soon turned to multiple minutes. He finally turned around, ready to tell whoever was making the noise how their distraction was beginning to anger him. At this point, it was going to give him a headache, whether from the sound itself or the stress. Again, no one there. He walked over to the window and unlocked it. He pushed it up and stuck his head out. "Hey, if anyone's out there, knock that tapping shit off," he shouted. He closed it and locked the window. Annoyed, he went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Leaving the room, he was no longer able to hear the source of his anger. He strolled into a beige tile room and approached a cream-colored, unremarkable fridge. He pulled a frosted cup from the nearby cabinet and pushed it up against the dispenser, fiddling with the appliance's keypad. As he chose cubed ice from the panel, it clicked for a moment, instantly recalling the sound of the window and brushing a scowl across his face. In a moment, the ice dropped into the hazy transparency of the glass. He stood there for a brief few moments as the refrigerator dispensed water into his cup. He grabbed the glass and sipped from it as he walked back towards his desk. He walked into the room to find his papers scattered across the floor. Damn it, he thought. He set his glass on the desk as he dropped to his knees to gather his papers. As soon as he looked at them, the tapping began once more. He whipped his head up to look at the window. Nothing there. He collected his papers, and as he stood up, he set them in a single pile back on the desk. He walked over to the window, and just like he thought it would be, it was still shut and locked tight. Suddenly, he heard the sound of glass shattering behind him. He jumped out of his skin at the noise and spun his head around. The water glass he just filled had been knocked onto the hardwood floor. "Oh, damn it!" he yelled as he ran to the kitchen to get paper towels. Glass everywhere, he added to himself, taking an entire roll out of the bulk package. He rushed back with the towels, ready to clean up the mess. But to his surprise, it was clean. The pile of shattered glass had been picked up and placed neatly on the desk, and the water had been dried. Not only were there no signs of it in the floor, there was zero evidence of whatever had cleaned it either. And strangely, the glass was arranged in a rectangular shape, seemingly placed in a very deliberate and conscious manner. "What the hell is going on?" he thought. Terrified, he looked around. Then he heard it again. The tapping was back, just like clockwork. Every time he looked away from the window, it would start. The same window every time. He couldn't be crazy, or so he thought, but there was no denying that it only happened when he looked away. No neighborhood child, no tree branch, no rain to splash it. There was no explanation for why it only happened under those specific circumstances. Just to test, he decided to look away from it again. And sure enough, the second he turned his back, it picked up. The man had had enough. He was not going to let a window of all things bother him anymore. He walked over to the other side of the house and opened the door to the garage. He picked up 2 bricks lying on the cement floor, acting as a makeshift weight to hold down an exercise mat. He walked back to the window in his workroom. He needed to finish this project, and if launching a brick through his window would allow that, then so be it, he thought. The man set one of the bricks on the floor, then stood as far back as possible within the office room, and covered his eyes as best he could. He raised his hand with the brick, almost as if he were pitching a baseball, and threw it with all his strength. He closed his eyes the millisecond before he let go of the brick to shield them from incoming glass. And suddenly, he heard the tapping. There was a single tap on the glass pane before the mahogany-colored brick sailed through it. Glass sprayed everywhere, some inside, but much of it out into the lawn below. Glass covered everything within a 2-foot radius. He stood in shock. He'd just shattered his window with a brick because of what? An annoying noise? He didn't know if he was going insane or if all of this was necessary to keep him sane in the first place. He sure as hell needed a new window pane. He closed his eyes and listened. Nothing. The tapping sound was finally gone. It was over. The noise had vanished. Finally, he could work without that incessant presence. He kept his eyes closed for a few more seconds, just to bask in the serene silence. It was the first time in almost an hour where that noise had left him for more than a handful of moments. Then he felt it. Icy breath on the back of his neck. He was too mortified to turn around. He stood motionless, terrified to even open his eyes. With fingers cold, bony, and sharp, he felt it tap on his right shoulder.